So all of this leads up to the main showdown, the main event, so to speak, when you look at the fighting on the plains. As the Sioux resistance continued into the 1870s, Crazy Horse had a vision that the material world that we knew was merely a shadow, and another true world existed beyond the shadows. And when Crazy Horse stepped into this world, nothing could hurt him. And his confidence and his magnetism really drew others to him. This charisma explains why he was such a respected leader, and his position grew after Red Cloud submitted to the federal government. Now the Sioux understood that there was gold in the Black Hills, and the Black Hills belonged to the Sioux from the Fort Laramie Treaty. The Sioux knew it was there, they knew that whites wanted it, and they worked to protect it at all costs. Prospectors understood the intensity with which the Sioux would protect their sacred lands, so they kept their distance. Until the Panic of 1873 led business owners to push to open the land up to prospecting. They demanded that the federal government determine if the rumors of gold were true, but President Grant resisted. President Grant really tried to honor the treaties between each tribe and the federal government, and he wanted Native Americans and whites to live in peace in addition to replacing corrupt officials with those who were just going to do their jobs. Now, the pressure of the panic proved to be too much, and Grant begrudgingly approved of an expedition to determine if there really was gold in the Black Hills. Now, the leader of this expedition is George Armstrong Custer. Armstrong is a Civil War cavalry hero he's full of himself. Custer is just full of himself. The scientists did find gold, and Eastern newspapers proclaimed this find to the nation. Grant did try to have the army stop the new influx of settlers, but there simply weren't enough soldiers. Grant did try to negotiate the purchase of the land with Red Cloud, but it was made clear that Red Cloud did not speak for all Sioux, and that Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, who was himself a popular medicine man, simply were never going to agree to it. Nearly 10,000 miners converged on the land, and Grant, whose administration was itself facing serious charges of corruption, really couldn't do anything to stop it. So really sensing a chance for glory, Custer rode out to meet Crazy Horse head on at Little Bighorn Creek, or what the Sioux referred to as Greasy Grass. The Crow scouts who were with the Union Army warned Custer that the Sioux force was much bigger than he was expecting, but he waved off these words of caution. 500 federal soldiers ended up squaring off against a force of about 2,500. But Custer had mistakenly believed that he was going to be fighting a fractured warband. What he got was a well-disciplined force led by Crazy Horse himself. Now, since Custer divided his forces, Sitting Bull held off Custer's men while Crazy Horse defeated the other unit, and then he circled back around to help Sitting Bull. Custer's men were wiped out in about 45 minutes. And Sitting Bull actually believed that Custer had to have been drunk, because no sober man would have led an assault that foolhardy. Now, as word of this reaches the east, sometimes it was called Custer's last stand. To his end, Grant believed that this was all unnecessary and was Custer's fault. However, you don't annihilate an entire unit of the army and not have the army try to retaliate. The 7th Cavalry was remanned, and they chased Crazy Horse through the rest of summer and the fall of 1876. Now, Crazy Horse and his band survived the winter, but they were starving come springtime, so even Crazy Horse yielded and moved on to a reservation. Sitting Bull had already fled to Canada by this point, and when Crazy Horse entered Fort Robinson, he was arrested. He was held down by members of his own tribe when he resisted, and had a bayonet thrust through his back by an army private. Thus ended the life and resistance of Crazy Horse. Now, Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce also attempted to resist unfair treatment, and he enjoyed a little more success. He had the sympathy of Eastern readers because the Nez Perce had always been considered, friends of the white man. This is what the newspapers actually said. Lewis and Clark spoke fondly of them, and they had always been at peace with the government. The struggle began in the 1850s, when Chief Joseph's father, also named Chief Joseph, refused to relinquish lands in exchange for annuity payments of blankets and food. Chief Joseph, the son, refused demands to move on to a reservation, and instead of meeting the Federals head-on, he decided to force the army to come after him, force them to pursue. For 11 weeks in 1877, he led his people through the Great Plains and even considered fleeing into Canada to join those who had refused to go on to a reservation with Crazy Horse. But in the end, he accepted the truce because he saw that his people, were starving and desperate. General Nelson Miles agreed to spare their lives and allow them to return to the reservation. And as he handed his rifle to Miles, these were the words of Chief Joseph. "It is cold and we have no blankets. The little children are freezing to death. My people, some of them, have run away to the hills and have no blankets, no food. No one knows where they are, perhaps freezing to death. I want to have time to look for my children and see how many of them I can find. Maybe I shall find them among the dead. Hear me, my chiefs. I am tired. My heart is sick and sad. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever."